everyone, Dave here. Thanks for coming along to another episode of the podcast. Great to have you with us. Now on the podcast this week we have PC Adam Collins with me. Now he is the dedicated football officer for Derbyshire Police. He grew up very much as a Chesterfield fan, going to games home and away, before joining the police force 18 years ago. He then became the dedicated football officer just a couple of years ago before the pandemic started. Now what this role is with Derbyshire Police is it basically covers the policing operation for Chesterfield home games, and then he'll also work with dedicated football officers around the country in terms of away games too. He spoke really well about how he works with the football club in terms of creating a safe and trouble-free matchday experience for everyone involved. He works with the safety team at the club, with the chairman, and also with the community trust on things like educational programmes too. All with the aim really of, like I say, creating a trouble-free match and also reducing the policing bill for the football club, which means we can then buy more Shimangas. He also spoke about the challenges that are currently facing the police force with things like safeguarding and social media, how policing has changed over the last 20 years in terms of how they police matches, and also his aspirations for what he'd like to achieve going forward too. Now, I'm at Spire Legends on Twitter and Instagram, Legends of the Spire on Facebook, so do get in touch, let me know what you thought about it, and you can also find PC Adam Collins on Twitter just by searching for the Spireites Police account as well. So here we are with the latest episode of the podcast, with PC Adam Collins, the dedicated football officer for Derbyshire Police. So you are a Chesterfield fan, is that right?
I'm a Chesterfield fan, yeah. Chesterfield born and bred, and yeah, a Chesterfield fan following in my father's footsteps, who's been a season ticket holder since before season tickets were even a thing. I think he's still there in the East Stand nowadays in his 70s. So yeah, Chesterfield lad.
Brilliant.
Following his footsteps, really. Yeah.
But when do you kind of first remember going to a match then? What kind of era would that be?
So it would have been my sort of era of going to watch and being a season ticket holder, sort of late 80s into the 90s. And then when I joined the police, I kind of, in 2002, sort of them years from 2002, right up to getting back into it work-wise, sort of cooking, unfortunately, just after the Cook era. And then I started doing the role-ish I'm doing now, football spotting rather than the dedicated football officer's role. Then obviously I was going to the games again, so you get that buzz as much as I've got to sort of curtail it now a little bit with my role. But yeah, it's certainly in there being from Chesterfield.
What are your kind of happy memories match wise then? I suppose FA Cup runs and
obviously FA Cup run. Again, that was probably towards the end of me sort of following Chesterfield home and away as a fan as such. But sort of my main, certainly early memories were the 1990 playoffs. So beating Stockport 4-0, going to Stockport as giving me age away, a 10-year-old lad with my dad, being held back in the ground. And I just remember being carried out with the ground, just my feet didn't touch the ground. I was just carried out in a bit of a crush out the ground. But the atmosphere was amazing then. Obviously Wembley, when we actually lost to Cambridge 1-0. Dion Dublin scored.
Yeah.
Remember Mick Leonard caught it, brought it down on the line, never went out, and the ref gave the corner, and Dion Dublin put it in from the corner against Mick Leonard. And then we celebrated on the way back, and all the Cambridge fans was coming out. I always remember it this day. Like they'd lost, and we were still celebrating even though we lost. It was crazy. So yeah, some really good memories. Really good memories.
Do you still get to enjoy football now that you kind of work? Does it spoil it almost when you work in?
It's not the same. Obviously, stood at the start on the front of the stand on Saturday at Grimsby, and obviously, Cabby putting that 85th minute, what turned out to be a winner in. It's not the same, not being in the crowd, and obviously with my role stood down, putting the uniform on, you do have to detach yourself. As much as I don't make it any secret I'm a Chesterfield fan, a lot of the fans that know me and speak to me on a match day, because I've been the dedicated football officer role now for 2 years, know I'm a fan of the club. I think it helps with my role a little bit. because I know what they're thinking, I know how they're feeling, I know. So obviously the area, I've sort of on that sort of same trajectory, if you like, as the fans. So yeah, it does help me in terms of my other parts of my role, but yeah, you do have to be slightly detach yourself, because obviously at the end of the day, you're there to do a job. But yeah, it's certainly a lot better doing my job in the last 12 months than it has been the last 4 or 5 previous years, because it's hard at the other end as well when the club haven't been doing so well. Obviously, I'm still doing the same job, but yeah, I drive home with a smile on my face rather than thinking where we're going and another relegation. And every Chesterfield fan knows how hard the last 5-6 years have been prior to this hopefully continuing revolution of the last 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, we're leaping forward a bit, but that was a question actually that I had, in that, is it easier or harder to police when a team is doing badly or when a team is doing well? What's kind of better for you?
Well,
When
yeah,
you're doing badly, the crowds go down, so you have less people to worry about. But when you're doing well, there's more of a feel good. Is there?
Yeah, obviously I policed Derby as well. Not my mate. There's sort of 2 of us in the office. One of us does Derby, and obviously I do Chesterfield or take the lead on Chesterfield, takes the lead on Derby, as well as other things what we'll go into. But yeah, it's kind of, it has different vibes. So obviously when we're doing really not so well, that the crowds was well down. A lot of the issues kind of police themselves, because the people who got probably overexcited, let's say, at this stage, and caused issue in terms of when police have to step in, kind of kept away because of the whole situation at the club. It obviously brought its other issues. Sort of, certainly remember the protest against Baseford, albeit it was peaceful, but it was a real horrible feeling around the club, and you could feel it from both sides. It wasn't a nice place to be, and that's not just coming from a supporter's point of view. Obviously my colleagues that I work with, it just wasn't a nice atmosphere to work in. Flip that round on its head. Now we're this last 12 months, the club have turned it around. Brilliant work, really, by all concerned. Then it brings larger crowds back, and then obviously, unfortunately, we do see the other side where people get a little bit overexcited, and so yeah, I wouldn't say it was all good or all bad, but it brings different challenges.
Yeah, definitely. So then if we go back to you actually joining the police,
yeah,
was that something you'd wanted to do for ages, or was it just, how did that
you know what? No, it was, anybody that knows me this would be the last role that they ever thought I'd apply for. I never grew up dreaming to be a police officer. Probably easy if I said I was, to be fair, but no, I always grew up wanting to work in Peak District, national parks, park ranger, and things like that. So I went to college for, got a sort of HND in countryside management, and yeah, kind of went down that path. Then one day I just remember sat in the office at work, and there was an advert at the Derbyshire Times recruiting police officers. I filled it in, and the rest of the day's history. Just kept going through and getting the letters saying come to the next phase, as it was back in those days. And yeah, next minute I was handing my resignation in and walking into Ripley headquarters on May 13th, 2002, and nearly 20 years later, here I am.
And I know kind of you have to do bleep tests and stuff like that, don't you, when you're joining police?
Yeah, the bleep test still in. I think it was at 8.2 when I joined, and you had to do sort of a 27 seconds shuttle run around cones obstacle course, and sort of grip test and strength test. Slightly different now, but we still have a yearly bleep tests and fitness tests and things like that. But yeah, it's in a blink of an eye, 20 years have gone like that.
What's it like getting to grips with being a police officer then?
I can't remember, to be honest. It is that long ago. You say 20 years, it's a long time, isn't it? But it's really not. And if I think about my life 20 years ago, it's a million miles away from where I am now. But yeah, I suppose looking back, your circle of friends change a little bit. You don't, not that you realise at the time, but people start seeing you as something else because you put the uniform on, which, as I said to you on the phone last week, that's something that will never particularly change. We can chip away at and we can try and change, but ultimately people see us. Some people see us as the big bad wolf, or they see us as upholding law or and I certainly in my current role, I try and flip that on its head and say, if you behave yourself or you abide by the rules, the law, then I'll talk to you and engage you and I'll have a cup of tea with you or whatever on any level. But we're always going to be seen as the bad ones, the party poopers, certainly when it comes to my current role. But there's a fine line, and I'd like to think we'll get it right. We're certainly a lot better than we used to be. I know that's probably a subject we'll come on to in terms of how the roles change and stuff like that. But again, answering your question, it has changed massively. If I think what I was like through my teens and early 20s to how I adapted, and you just your social circles slightly change. But again, it's kind of subtle changes without you really realising till you sort of look back.
You'll have obviously started off as a kind of a policeman just on the beat, and didn't you? So when did it come about with being the dedicated police? Football officer, sorry.
My current role is I'm DFO or dedicated football officer for primarily my club's Chesterfield. So I've only actually done that. I got the job October 2019, so literally a few months before good old COVID set in. And before that, I'd just done 18 years on sort of response, so frontline 999, answering 999 calls. But in addition to that, in 2010, I sort of started to be what we used to call a football spotter. So we call them operational football officers now. So the team that I now manage, so they'll just work with us on spot on match days. So I've been in that world since about 2010, just doing match day officers, working with the DFO. And then my predecessor, when PC Wright retired in October, I was lucky enough, applied and got the role. I suppose I was just waiting for him to retire for 9 years, to be fair. But I love it. And like I say, I do miss the shift side of it. I do miss coming on and off with a big shift and running around with blue lights on. But I think it gets to a point where you need a break from it. And 18 years looking back was probably a lot longer than most do in that frontline role. And this bar COVID, I've really enjoying it.
So you mentioned the spotters.
Yeah.
So are they the guys that we see kind of with cameras and or things like that? They're just kind of in and around.
Not so much with cameras. We do carry cameras around with, but sort of the cameras will be what are called evidence gatherers. So the spotters will wear the same sort of blue and yellow vest that we wear, that DFOs wear, and they'll have sort of an increased knowledge. They'll work more games than sort of your average officer, and they'll sort of get to know more, because ultimately we are a safer neighbourhoods team, a beat team for that club. So we try and sort of engage with the fans, which is a massive change to how going through the ages we used to police football. We have improved, but I think for me, unfortunately, some people still think we're policed like this in the 90s, even the noughties, if you like, the 2000s. Certainly this last 10 years, how we react and plan and brief and engage at football matches is worlds apart. But it'll take a while to get in people's mindsets of how we do. And we don't always get it right.
You can't.
No. Sometimes you put in an impossible position, and we don't get it right all the time. And it's about learning from each incident, really. Certainly every time there's a category game, there's planning meetings go into that. There's briefings, and ultimately there's a debrief. Even if everything's gone right, we always have a debrief. So we're always looking to improve. My personal thoughts are we have come a million miles compared to where we were not that many years ago.
So, does every police force in the country kind of have a dedicated football officer or equivalent? Then is this a national thing?
Yeah. So if you go on, there's a thing called the APP, so Authorised Professional Practice. If you put it in Google, it'll come up, and under the DFO role, it'll say that each force should have a DFO. If you've got a top 5 division club within your force should have somebody dedicated to that club. So I suppose ultimately the DFO role, if you read this goes on for about 3 pages, but ultimately it's that you're there to act as a link between police, supporters and the club. So a bit of liaison officer. So before it became the DFO role, it was called FIO, sort of Force Intelligence Officer. So they've just kind of modernised that, really, made it, and you are that link between the club. Ultimately, I see it as a beat bobby for the club. So where we have beat bobbies for like Omall or Lowndes the Green or Chesterfield Town Centre, I am that, but just happen to be for a football club rather than a specific area as such. So yeah, from my point of view, I think it works really well.
So take me through like a week of your life. So if we had a match day on a Saturday,
yeah,
then take us through from like Monday to Sunday, what your kind of basic bits are that you do each week.
Yeah, so our shift pattern's Tuesday to Saturday, so we have Sunday, Mondays off. So Tuesdays, if we're into match on a Tuesday, normally it's mopping up from any incidents that's gone off Saturday, sort of reviewing any body cam or CCTV, linking in with the club, see if anything's happened there. I work really closely with the safety officer, Tony Booker, at the club. In fact, I speak to him more than my wife sometimes. I've been on phone to him 3 times today. So that's sort of my counterpart at the club, if you like. And me and Tony work really, really well together. And then obviously if anything has happened on the Saturday, it's a case of, I'm still a police officer. We investigate everything. If there's been a pitch incursion or there's some damage or there's been an assault, some antisocial behaviour, there's obviously things will go down with that. So we have an active workload as well. So there's things that probably happened at the Torquay game a few months ago that still sat in my workload that I'm still sort of looking into or making inquiries into. But in terms of the match if there was a match on the following Saturday, certainly if it's a category game, so like your Grimsby's, Stockport's, Wrexham's, the ex-league teams, there's always a 3-pronged planning process for them. So a month before the game, there'll be what we call an initial planning meeting. So we'd get together with sort of Silver Commander, and I'd sort of give the intelligence on Chesterfield, on say for a Chesterfield Grimsby game, and they basically make a decision how many resources we need for that game. And 2 weeks after that, we'd have an interim planning meeting. So I'd give them a bit more intelligence on the latest, what was happening. They'd sort of make further plans around what resources are going into the game. And then obviously a few days before the game, there'd be a final planning meeting where they put the final plan and final staffing in place, briefing, operation orders and things like that. So it's kind of a bit of a round robin, but yeah, there's a lot of work goes into certainly the category games. A lot of work goes into seeing, or if you see vans full of cops, they're not just magically appeared. There's quite a lot of planning and processing goes into that. And then when it comes around to match day, it's running all the briefings, making sure we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, really. And the big thing for us that we're really pushing is, 10 plus years ago, maybe you saw a different policing approach on a match day. People used to stand there in the full kit with the pads on underneath, so it's hands in pockets, maybe not engaging as much. Mm-hmm. Very rare now will you see officers suited and padded up. It's all about, we press it at briefings, engage, talk to folk. We're all human beings, and you can try and cut them barriers down, those boundaries down, and in a way, even if you only affect 1% of people, you can change the mindsets a little bit. And we're seeing some really good results with it.
And it's weird, isn't it, how some teams, there'll be some matches in a season where people will say, oh, there'll be trouble at that one. Like you do with like Grimsby.
Yeah.
We've not played them for quite a few years, but
yeah.
And everyone will go, oh, it's Grimsby. It's kind of strange, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's all I've had for the last month on a match day. Oh, it's Grimsby. Oh, you're going to be busy, Adam. You're going to be busy Saturday. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, it's Grimsby. Everybody comes up to you and say that. Yes, there was a little bit of trouble. It's well documented on social media on Saturday, but, it was isolated. It wasn't the majority of people who went to that match, went to the game to see the game. We're talking about really small percentage of people that unfortunately Humberside Police had to put a sizable policing operation on for, and the rest of it, majority of them wouldn't even seen a police officer, wouldn't have seen any trouble. If it hadn't been for social media, they wouldn't have known anything that had gone off. And it was isolated. It wasn't, we're not talking about back in the dark days of the 70s and 80s where people were scared to go to the games. We're a million miles away from that. But unfortunately, football violence is still there, hence why I probably do my role. But hopefully, how we're working it now, it is isolated incidents rather than sort of all-day brawls when we look in the dark days of the 70s and 80s.
How has it changed then over the years? Because you've mentioned kind of how you're trying to change how you do things a bit from many years ago. So how has that changed?
Funny enough, I've just done a course. We call it POPSA course, so Public Order, Public Safety Advisor course, 2 weeks in Manchester. And it's all, the course was all designed around, there's a massive change in 2009 when, I don't know if you remember, a lad got hit, I think it was down the Met, and a lad got hit at a demonstration in front of the line of a police baton line, got hit with a baton, fell over, seriously injured. And it was kind of a massive review. Then obviously we had the riots in 2011. And we kind of changed as policing style, really. We stopped escorting fans. I remember working the Derby Forest game for years and years and years. And I remember one year, probably about 7-8 years ago now, we always used to escort them from the pub near the train station to the ground. So we used to marching from the train station to the pub, not let them out of the pub, marching from the pub to the ground. And we used to give them kind of a bit of a security blanket, really, for want of a better word. And they expected us, but we kind of highlighted that it was there, which caused its own trouble. And then we should stop doing that. We said, no, we'll put a policing operation on, and you can go where you want, basically. And I always remember the Forest fans going, "What do you mean you're not escorting us?" Like, no, you're free to go anyway. Like, that's not safe to do so. I was, well, why isn't it? Just, you chose to come to the game. We're all grown adults. Go to the game. And it was changing that mindset, and it was really strange, really brave from our gaffers, to be fair, at the time to make that call not to escort him. But a few years down the line now, it's paid dividends, and we don't see that there is still a place for escorts, but we don't see that it was kind of routine where now it's just as and when. We kind of give people the sense in, until you cause an issue, go where you want. And we're even now, it's going to the point where we're losing the home and away tags that we used to put on pubs, which I think's really good. But we're not going that long way where there were pubs where there was absolute no-go on any match, to remind you, high category games. So I'd say it's small steps, but I think it is getting better. But unfortunately, like I said, my favourite saying is we haven't got a magic wand. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and it will take time. And people ask me, and I know it's a favourite question of, oh, you don't have DFOs at rugby or DFOs at cricket or anything like that. And yeah, because it's kind of inbuilt into football, it's passed on from generation to generation. Sometimes you've got movies made, and you've got specific laws that only relate to football, which you haven't got in other sports. And that's only because history dictates. Again, going back to the 70s and 80s, even Margaret Thatcher called it the English disease. It's going to take a bit. Will we ever get to a perfect world where you don't need a DFO, or you don't need a policing presence at football games, certainly category football games? That is the ideal world we're all aiming for, because ultimately it costs taxpayer a lot of money, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting as well. You talk about how it all changed. I imagine back then there was some people in the police going, "You shouldn't do." You should do that.
Yeah.
And that you had to kind of change. That as more police came in, I suppose they'd get used to it a bit quicker. I'd imagine it was a bit of a culture change, just as well.
Yeah, massive culture change, because it was always, it's this game. Oh, we need this amount of staff on. And we always used to have sort of set amount of staffs where everything's bespoke now. So we look at the information intelligence, we look at the threat and risk on each individual game. And ultimately, because the times we live in, the less police we can put to that game, the more resources we can put to other things. So, there has been, I know before COVID, we did a review of the unit, and we had cut the office hours dedicated to football by quite some. And that's just because how we've changed the ballpark. But unfortunately, I don't think, certainly my service, that we'll ever get to a point where we can have, you won't see police at games. I think we're a long way off that, but it's certainly in the last 10 years, it has become a safer place to go and watch a game of football. Yet we're not quite at rugby's level yet, and I don't think we probably ever will be. But it's small steps.
So what are the main priorities at the moment then? Is there anything that's, because obviously, and I was asked, it kind of links into the next question as well, which I was going to talk about social media, because obviously during the Euros, there was all the incidents of all the racist abuse and things that were all over social media. And that's something that's kind of a still relatively new thing, isn't it? That's coming over the last decade or so.
Yeah, it's obviously since COVID, it's kind of behind closed doors things, and people was watching games online and things like that. It became a real problem of the online hate. Certainly the hate aspect of it. One of my other roles, I'm actually an England spotter as well, so I've just got a job following England. So the same job I do at Chesterfield, I do for England as well. But before I got the England role in the summer, I was anytime the tournament or on the investigation team. So actually for the Euros, I sat on. There was 10 of us around the country sat on. So we're run by the UKFPU, so United Kingdom Football Policing Unit, who's based down in Croydon. So that's where the central hub is, in Croydon, the home office there. But there was 10 of us around the country having sort of daily briefings and investigating up everything that was coming in. I think at the last count, there was over 200 specific points of contact sent out in terms of crimes just relating to the penalty misses for the 3 players. It was crazy. It was really crazy. So only managed to whittle it down to 200 in terms of cases going out as packages. But the meltdown from that, and we're living in year 2021. It just shouldn't be happening, and the amount of work it takes to look at that is phenomenal. And I know people say about Facebook and Twitter, they should do more, which I don't fall out with. And we need to get to the point where if you have a social media account, it can only be you that's created that account. Each account's got to be accountable, because that is the only way we're going to get rid of it. I was on a Facebook meeting a few months ago now, and the amount of traffic on them platforms, you cannot. I know people say you can't just put keywords or block everything. You block so much stuff. But even I should have wrote the figures down really to tell you, but the figure, it was in the absolute millions per minute. There's just no way of putting any filters away without cutting the freedom of speech out, because that's the problem. If they start filtering up too much, nothing would ever get put on it, and it kind of ruined the idea behind the platform. Sorry, I've gone off on one now, haven't I? But it's in terms of his current issues, obviously the racial stuff. Myself and Roger Brown, who does Derby, the DFO in Derbyshire Police, did a video, anti-racism video, and it is an issue. You do things like that, and it took sort of 10 minutes at a time to do the video, and you get the usual comments. Oh, you need to be out there locking burglars up and murderers, and yeah, there's a lot more police resources put into, quite rightly so, put into that. Derbyshire Police CID department is huge. We just don't do Derby and Chesterfield. We also look at Alfreton, and then we've got the other clubs as well, like Matlock, Buxton, Belper, Ilkeston, all are having really good seasons that we do look after as well. So yeah, so the racial stuff is really big online at the moment. I've been into the players in September at Chesterfield and sort of give her input to them as well, around sort of investigations. How can I help if they were victims of such things? We do see it from the stands to players as well. So trying to cut that out and sort of build them bridges there. It's about educating people, really. And again, there's no quick fix to it. It's all about sort of getting it out there. And we've got 2 cases going through Derbyshire courts at the moment for the Euro final stuff. So as soon as they're out, again, it'll be a case of using social media and getting it out there, saying, these things will be, it's not all right. You can't hide behind your keyboard, and you'll be found. Whatever you do online, it does leave a digital footprint. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a hot potato at the moment. The other massive thing for us is safeguarding sort of vulnerability up and down the country. Obviously, we've got quite good links with other DFOs up and down the country. We've all got one database that we work off, that we share information on. Issues with sort of youth, and I'm talking kids as young as 12 or 13 up to sort of 18 to 20. There's a real problem with sort of antisocial behaviour at football with like-minded groups. So from a safeguarding point of view and an educational point of view, really, that's probably at the moment takes up the majority of my time, even over the racial stuff. So I'd say that, along with the racial stuff, it is kind of the 2 things that are the current and really cause an issue, to be fair, within sort of policing football.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about, like you say, policing historically, you kind of have this image of police a bit different to how they are now, because you're kind of social workers. You've got to be good with people, haven't you? And you've got to be able to talk to people and engage with people, and especially if they're really young as well. Definitely.
Yeah. And clubs have moved on a million miles, and that's the other advantage of our role. Like I said, I mentioned Tony Buck earlier, but I work really, really close with Tony, and they've got their own safeguarding policy, which probably 10 years ago they wouldn't have done. The world's moving on, and we are moving on with it, and it is helping massively, I think. But again, the problem is, another part of our role that I'll talk about is I go into school. So the few months between getting the role and COVID coming in, I started to do a lot of school inputs, sort of aged at that youth element. So sort of year 11 and 12, so GCSE level, going in, giving our inputs, showing them some videos, and do you turn left or do you turn right? These are consequences of your own action. What's fun on a Saturday afternoon with your mates? It's not fun 2 weeks later when you sat opposite me in a police interview room because you've chucked something, or you've damaged somebody, you've assaulted somebody, or you've racially abused somebody, and then the impact that can have on future job prospects and things like that. But hopefully, before it gets to that point, the idea of going into schools is try and educate and stop them getting that far, because they don't think, because it's heat of the moment things. Sometimes it's crowd mentality, pack mentality. They're with the mates, or the mates are doing it, or they want to look good in front of the friends. And it's about having them basic conversations with people, saying it's not you're going to be friend stood there in the interview room or in court or applying for that job where 2 of you go for the final interview. One's not known to police, one's got a caution for a silly thing like chucking something on a football pitch or going onto the football pitch. We're talking basic offences, but that can be the difference. And by doing that, something that we've probably never done before, we are seeing a difference. But just a case of trying to get around everybody, really. And
what's it like working with the club then? Because you obviously say you'll have quite a lot of kind of back and forth with them, I suppose. By week.
Yeah, I've got a really good relationship with the club. Like I say, COVID's not out. We had sort of grand plans, but it's really hard. We thought we were getting there with it, and all of a sudden it's coming back again. I have regular contact with John Crute, who's really good, really helpful, really supportive, and we bounce ideas off each other. Obviously, Terry Ward is a safety certificate holder, so we have a lot of conversations with him. But ultimately, with Tony Booker, who's kind of my sort of go-to at the club, and we work really closely together on a match day. all really good blokes, all sort of know my role and my limitations, but that stuff that they can do for me, we kind of work really well, and it's all about making a football event safe, cutting down the antisocial behaviour, cutting down the criminality, cutting down the crime reports, and ultimately, if we get that right, cut down the police resources we have to put to matches, and people, we can put as police resources elsewhere. Also got to give a mention to Keith Jackson as well. We're in sort of initial meetings to go into it, to get me back into the schools, because obviously they've already got the links from the community trust, and the work they do is fantastic. I'm only sort of a couple of meetings in with them at the moment, so that's sort of a new venture I'm trying to go down. But yeah, really important that all them people I've mentioned, and there's loads of people I haven't mentioned there as well, got really good relationship with everybody at the club. And it does help that last 12 months have turned around because before that it wasn't the nicest place to go sometimes, because it never is when you lose match after match after match. So it's a happy place to be around at the moment. When I do go down there on a non-match day, it's really positive, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I was going to mention actually, because with it having community trust now, it is more, there's like an educational focus, isn't there? To the club. So I suppose that links in quite well with you, doesn't it? And I suppose it must be quite pleasing for you to have that.
Really well, yeah. When I first took the role on, and I sent email after email to all the schools in the area, and they're offering me 20-minute slots. And as you can see, I can probably talk about football all day. So 20 minutes is not worth anybody's time of going in, because by the time I've introduced myself and told my role, that's 20 minutes up. And but I did manage to get in 3 schools before COVID shut, and sort of to big assemblies and 2-hour slots. But the idea going forward, sort of with Community Trust and Keith Jackson, is to do more targeted areas. So obviously, because of the role they do, they have a lot of sort of vulnerability groups that they've already got contact with. They're already in schools. They've already got that contact. So it's a case of doing more targeted work really around the people that probably cause me issue. I say me, sort of police issue on a match day. To try and get to that happy place a lot quicker, and ultimately stop people getting arrested, stop people getting police records, and to educate them, which is one of the key part of my role, really, minimising ASB and criminality, and creating that link with supporters, and hopefully most supporters. And it's a great graphic that I used on my briefing, where we sort of categorise people like we do games now. So we have sort of operational football officers only games, low category, medium category, high category. And we have that same with sort of what we call risk supporters, or it used to be called hooligans back in the day, but we nicely call them risk supporters now. So we sort of have high, low and medium category supporters as well. So it's all about moving them from that high category and engaging with them and working with them, and try and get them to the medium, low, and even non-risk, which obviously the majority of people are. But if we can do that, brilliant, then our job's done, and we can put as a resource into other things. But it's really easy when you say it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've just solved all police's issues in 20 minutes.
Doesn't sound like a hard job at all.
No, it's easy. Yeah, if only.
I suppose, like you've touched on as well, it's like a line in the budget for the club, isn't it? Policing. Yeah. So if you do get things that escalate in certain seasons or whatever, it does have a financial impact actually on the club then, doesn't it?
Yeah. Obviously, as you know, I'm not sort of giving any secret. I'm not going into details. Not giving any secrets away. But everybody opens the accounts. They can see the policing bill historically. There is a policing cost to the club for category games. There's a charge which obviously is reflected in the accounts every year at the AGM. So yeah, the more my role can work with the club, hopefully the more we can bring that bill down. Again, we're talking best case scenario, but that's why it's really important to have these links and the work we do with the community trust, and right from the top. We're talking chief exec John Crew right down to Tony Booker, match safety officer, and I'll give Dean Hill a mention as well, stadium manager, because I'm on phone to him most days. There's a lot of communication going off between a lot of them, and there's a lot of good people working at the club. And ultimately, if I can bring that policing bill down, then we're in a win-win, because it means that we've cut that threat and risk down. We've made it a more enjoyable atmosphere to go to the game.
What's it like working with some of the other clubs around Derbyshire? Because there's obviously it's weird, isn't it, Derbyshire for football clubs?
Yeah.
We've always historically had Derby and Chesterfield, but then you've got a lot of other smaller clubs as well.
Yeah,
you must be working around quite a few outside of those.
Yeah, I do have, because Rog does Derby and that does sort of consume majority of his time. My role within the unit, I do Chesterfield, sort of my main club, but then I do have a lot to do with Alfreton, and then I do keep in touch with Matlock, Buxton, Belper, and Rog does Ilkeston, actually. So I don't have much to do with it, Ilkeston, but we've kind of cut it north and south just to keep it easy. But yeah, certainly under COVID, we had a lot to do with it, because they were still lad fans, and Chesterfield, Derby and Alfreton weren't. So we sort of got around them, and I've got some really good keys. Again, myself and Tony Booker really supported the club. I know there's just been a social media post gone out about it for the FA Cup second round game. So me, Tony and Kev Mason, the one who's head stewards, went up to the club the week before when all the snow was on the ground, and spent a couple of hours around there and sort of pointing out what they need to get it, because it's a massive fixture for them. They only normally get sort of around 1,000 people maybe, and to try and get 4,000 people in that ground that's stuck in middle of an housing estate is no mean feat. And the work that went into, and certainly the advice that Tony gave him, and all thanks to the club really, again, John Crew allowing Tony to do that as well. It just shows how far the club's moved on from the sort of previous 5 years of what we've all seen, to the community trust taking over, and the fact that they really want to put it as a community club, and even help other Derbyshire clubs out, which a lot of work went into that Buxton game, and I know that they're really thankful for it. And I know they put a post out about it last week, but it's kind of under-egged it really a little bit, all the work that Tony did for it, and that's all thanks to the club really. I know they've got great links with Matlock as well. Obviously Chesterfield play them in a friendly every year and let them keep the money as well. But yeah, it's a really feel-good factor. I feel it's certainly from a Derbyshire policing point of view, in terms of the community impact that the club's having at the moment. It's really, really positive. I know Belper phoned me up last week, and straight away I phoned Tony up, and he gave him a couple of stewards to work last Saturday because they had a few issues. We swapped some safeguarding plans. So there's a real sort of community feel around Derbyshire football really at the moment, and long may it continue. So we can help each other, then we can cut these things down. Then it's all about making it an enjoyable place to go again, isn't it?
So the last few bits really from me. So you've got the social media account.
I have.
At Spireites Police, isn't it?
That's the one, yeah.
So have you had some fun interactions on there? I can imagine. I mean,
yeah. I sometimes have to reread it before I post it, but obviously, ultimately, it is a police account, so I have to be mindful sometimes that what it is. But again, it's something that it's been around long before I was DFO. Dave Wright before me used it, but it was all very rigid back in the day. And again, much to how we police football, really, it was all about sort of arrest and who's been charged and can we identify this person, and there was no sort of fun stuff on there. And there's a fine balance to be struck. For me personally, and I know obviously I'm governed by the powers that be, and certainly everything I put on there, or the way I try and run the account, ultimately gets viewed by my sergeant. But I use it as a massive engagement tool. I said when I took the job, and certainly my first meeting with the club, that if I can sort of try and de-uniform myself, and show that I'm a human being doing a role, then that was my way of looking at doing the role, really, because then fans talk to you. And they were all human beings. We all want, majority of us want to go and watch a trouble-free match. And we're getting there slowly. Whether we'll ever get there fully, that's another story. But yeah, I really try and use it as an engagement tool. And if I can get people talking and interacting, that's how I see it. Obviously, it backfires sometimes when I have to do the end game, which if people do overstep the mark and I have to arrest them, then obviously because of my role, I end up dealing with them. And it's frustrating because I see posts going on that I know is not true, but I can't comment because obviously there's court proceedings and things like that. So yeah, as much as I love using it as an engagement tool, it's also frustrating at times because obviously from a police account, we have to play by the rules and you can't always comment. I try and use it to kind of deunify and show that I call myself a fan liaison officer sometimes. So I'm there to act as a link between the police and the club and supporters. But ultimately, sometimes I have to be the big bad wolf that go around do the door knocks when people have overstepped the line as well.
So we're getting near the end, but I was going to ask, like, this current season.
Yeah.
So it's nice for you. You're a boyhood Chesterfield fan, so it's nice for you to be able to see a winning team and a feel good around the club and stuff.
Yeah.
I suppose ultimately you're hoping, like everyone else, that we're lifting a trophy at the end of the season and it's all good and fun at the end of the season. And then I suppose that links into me kind of, when we go up a league, we're working then with a completely different bunch of clubs. So is that quite nice that you're not chatting to the same dedicated football officers?
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, obviously. But when I started as a spotter for the club, or as a operational football officer, as they're now called, there was in League One. So I've gone from League One to League Two to what the 4th year is it now in National League. So yeah, it'd be nice to have a change of clubs. It'd just be nice to get back the league status back for the club, ultimately, and yeah, see a different set of fans. Obviously, the only advantage from my point of view of being in the same league is that at least you've got some recent history. You've got what happened last year, right? So you've got a bit of a blueprint of recent history. Obviously, some of the clubs that hopefully Chesterfield will be playing next year in League Two. It's probably been 4, 5, 6 years since we played some and more. Certainly for the ones that are dropping down from League One, but a nice problem to have and a problem I really, really hope that I am having next year. And when we do, I'll come back on and speak to you.
What, just before we play Mansfield?
Yeah, I might be busy just before we play Mansfield, but who knows? Hopefully Mansfield will get promoted, same as we do, and
or relegated.
Yeah, well, yeah.
On the way.
I couldn't possibly. I'm probably get stick for saying that, to be fair, but yeah, I mean, we're all football fans, and certainly I do the role. I love the high category games, to be fair. That's what I do the role for. The games against the sort of lower attendance clubs, they're all very run of the mill and nothing to get excited about for. So yeah, I certainly signed up for the role and applied for the job to do those, to do the Mansfield games, to do the Grimsby games, the Stockport games, because that's where I really want to make a difference at. And without sounding too cheesy, where obviously your games, where you're only getting 50, 60 away fans, it's just not the same, is it? That stadium wasn't built for 50, 60 away fans. It was built with 1,500 plus in that north stand, or 2,500 using the 2 blocks of the east stand as well. It's been a sad demise, and hopefully we've turned the corner and we can get that league status back. But it's, as Mr. Rowe will say, it's not over yet. It's a really tough league to get out of. I mean, the form the club's been in, and it's so tight up the top of the league still, isn't it? Yeah. It's ridiculously hard to get out of. But fingers crossed they'll go and do it this year.